Hello, history buffs. Today we will get acquainted with the life story of the great Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy. Lev Tolstoy is one of the greatest novelist writers in the world. He is not only the world's largest literary figure, but also a philosopher, religious thinker, and illuminator. You will learn more about this from this biography. Leo Tolstoy was born on August 28, 1828 in the Russian Empire, the Krapovensk district of the Tula province, in the hereditary estate of his mother, Yasnaya Polyana. He was the fourth child. Mother died in 1830 from childbearing fever. As then said, it happened 6 months after the birth of daughter, when Lev was not yet 2 years old. As a result, the father's cousin took care of the children, including the little Lev. 7 years later, the future writer's father, Count Nikolai Tolstoy, died suddenly. As a result of these tragic events, their aunt becomes their guardian. After the death of his aunt, Lev Nikolaevich, together with his brothers and sisters, moved to the second aunt, living in Kazan. It is interesting that Leo Tolstoy fondly recalled his childhood years, despite the fact that during this period his biography had many dramatic incidents. His primary education the future writer received at home. He was taught by German and French teachers. In 1843, Tolstoy entered the Faculty of Oriental Languages at the Imperial Kazan University. In 1843, Tolstoy attended the Faculty of Oriental Languages. However, this field of education was not easy for him. Due to poor grades he had to move to a lighter law school. According to official data from Tolstoy's biography, his academic problems did not end, but led him to leave the school in 1847 without receiving any degree. After that, Tolstoy decides to return to his parents' estate in order to engage in farming activities. But in this field he does not work, as he was constantly on the road to cities of Russia. But what he did succeed in was keeping a personal diary. This habit inspired him to write his novels, and allowed him to form most of his life goals and priorities. Interestingly, this nuance in Tolstoy's biography, keeping a diary, was a consequence of imitating the great Benjamin Franklin. Naturally, Leo Tolstoy had a hobby. He was extremely fond of music. His favorite composers were Bach, Handel, and Chopin. It is clear from his biography that he could sometimes play the piano for a few hours on Mozart, Chopin, Mendelssohn, and Schumann. It is known that Tolstoy's older brother, Nikolai, had a great influence on him. He was a friend and mentor of the future writer. It was Nicholas who invited his younger brother to join the military service in the Kavkaz. As a result, Lev Tolstoy became a cadet, and in 1854 he was transferred to Sevastopol, where he participated in the Crimean War until August 1855. During the service, Lev Nikolaevich had quite a lot of free time. During this period he wrote an autobiographical story, Childhood, in which he masterfully described the memories of the first years of life. This work was an important event for his biography. As soon as Childhood was published in Contemporary magazine, Tolstoy immediately gained popularity as a writer. The story became so famous that Tolstoy was instantly elevated to the same level with such writers of that time as Turgenev, Ostrovsky, and Goncharov. After that, Leo Tolstoy writes the following story, Cossacks, in which he describes his army life in the Kavkaz. Work on this work continued until 1862, and was completed only after military service. It is interesting that Tolstoy did not stop his writing activities even during the Crimean War. In this period under his pen leaves a story, Adolescence, which is the continuation of Childhood, as well as Sevastopol stories. After the end of the Crimean War Tolstoy leaves the service. On arrival home, he already has a great fame in the literary field. His prominent contemporaries talk of a major acquisition for Russian literature in the person of Tolstoy. As a young man, Tolstoy was known for his arrogance and stubbornness, as can be seen from his diary notes. He refused to belong to any philosophical school, and once publicly called himself an anarchist, then decided to leave for France in 1857. Soon he had an interest in gambling, but it did not last long. When he lost all his savings, he had to return home from Europe. By the way, the passion for gambling is observed in the biographies of many writers. Despite all difficulties, he writes the last, third part of his autobiographical trilogy, Youth. This happened in the same 1857. Since 1862, Tolstoy began publishing the pedagogical journal Yasnaya Polyana, where he was the main employee. However, lacking a publisher's calling, Tolstoy managed to produce only 12 issues. On September 23, 1862, Tolstoy's biography took a sharp turn. He married Sophia Andreevna Bayers, who was the daughter of a doctor. From this marriage 9 sons and 4 daughters were born. 5 of the 13 children died in childhood. When the wedding took place, Sophia Andreevna was only 18 years old, and Count Tolstoy was 34. It is interesting that before his marriage Tolstoy confessed to his future wife in his premarital relations. For some time in the biography of Tolstoy comes the brightest period. He is really happy, thanks in large part to the practicality of his wife, material wealth, outstanding literary creativity and in connection with him all Russian and even world fame. In the face of his wife Tolstoy found an assistant in all cases, practical and literary. In the absence of the secretary, she copied his drafts several times. Very soon, however, their happiness is overshadowed by inevitable petty squabbles, fleeting quarrels, and mutual misunderstandings, which have worsened over the years. The fact is that for his family Leo Tolstoy proposed a unique life plan, according to which he intended to give a part of the family income to the poor and schools. He wanted to simplify his family's way of life, while intending to sell and distribute everything superfluous, piano, furniture, carriages. Naturally, his wife, Sophia Andreevna, was not satisfied with such an ambiguous plan. On the basis of this they had their first serious conflict, which was the beginning of undeclared war for ensuring the future of their children. In 1892, Tolstoy signed a separate The End Act, unwilling to be the owner, gave his wife and children all the property. It must be said that Tolstoy's biography is in many ways unusually controversial due to his relationship with his wife, with whom he lived for 48 years. Tolstoy is one of the most prolific writers. His works are large not only in volume, but also in meaning, which he touches in them. The most popular works of Tolstoy are War and Peace, Anna Karenina and Resurrection. In the 1860s Lev Tolstoy lives with the whole family in Yasnaya Polyana. It was here that his most famous novel War and Peace was born. Initially part of the novel was printed in Russian Gazette under the name 1805. After 3 years, 3 more chapters appeared, making the novel completely over. He was destined to be the most outstanding creative result in Tolstoy's biography. Both critics and the public have long debated about the work War and Peace. The subject of their dispute was the Napoleonic Wars, described in the book. Thought-out yet fictional characters were also sharply discussed. The novel also became interesting in that it was presented 3 informative satirical essays about the laws of history. Among other ideas, Leo Tolstoy tried to convey to the reader that a person's position in society and the meaning of his life are derived from his daily activities. In the late 1880s, Tolstoy wrote the novel The Resurrection. His plot was based on a genuine court case. It is in Resurrection clearly marked sharp views of the author on church ceremonies. By the way, this work was one of the reasons that led to the complete separation between the Orthodox Church and Count Tolstoy. Despite the fact that the above-described works were a huge success, the writer did not give any joy. He was depressed and suffered a deep internal devastation. In this connection, the next stage of Tolstoy's biography was a continuous, almost frantic search for meaning of life. Initially, Lev Nikolaevich sought answers to questions from the Orthodox Church, but this did not bring him any results. Over time, he began to criticize both the Orthodox Church and the Christian religion in general. He began to publish his thoughts on these acute issues in Mediator. His main position was that the Christian teaching is good, but Jesus Christ himself as if not necessary. That is why he decided to make his own translation of the Gospel. In general, Tolstoy's religious views were extremely complex and confusing. It was some incredible mixture of Christianity and Buddhism, seasoned with various Oriental beliefs. In 1901, the Holy Synod of Government issued a definition of Count Leo Tolstoy. This was a decree officially declaring that Leo Tolstoy was no longer a member of the Orthodox Church, as his publicly expressed beliefs were incompatible with such membership. The definition of the Holy Synod is sometimes misinterpreted as anathema of Tolstoy from the Church. Due to his new beliefs, Leo Tolstoy wanted to distribute all his savings and give up his own property to the poor. However, his wife, Sophia Andreevna, protested categorically in this regard. In this connection, Tolstoy's biography revealed a major family crisis. When Sophia Andreevna learned that her husband had publicly renounced the copyright on all his works, which was, in fact, their main source of income, they began violent conflicts. From Tolstoy's diary. She does not understand, and children do not understand, spending money, that every ruble lived by them and earned by books. There is suffering, my disgrace. It is a shame, but for that weakening of the action that the preaching of truth might have. Of course, it is not difficult to understand Lev Nikolaevich's wife. After all, they had 9 children, whom he, by and large, left without means of subsistence. Sofia Andreevna, who was pragmatic, rational and active, could not allow this to happen. Eventually, Tolstoy made a formal will, handing over the rights of his youngest daughter, Alexandra Lvovna, who fully sympathized with his views. At the same time, an explanatory note was attached to the will that in fact these texts should not become anyone's property, and the authority to monitor the processes is assumed by Vladimir Chertkov, a faithful follower and pupil of Tolstoy, who was supposed to take all the writer's writings down to the drafts. Tolstoy's later works were realistic fiction, as well as stories full of moral content. In 1886 one of the most famous Tolstoyevsky novels appeared, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Her main character realizes that he spent most of his life in vain, and the realization came too late. In 1898 Lev Nikolaevich wrote an equally famous work, Father Sergius. In it, he criticized his own beliefs, which appeared after his spiritual rebirth. During the last years of his biography, Leo Tolstoy was best known as a religious leader and moral authority. His thoughts were aimed at resisting evil in a non-violent way. During his lifetime, Tolstoy became an idol for most Russian people. Despite all his achievements, however, there were serious shortcomings in his family life, which became particularly acute in old age. The writer's wife, Sofia Andreevna, did not agree with her husband's views, and she disliked some of his followers who often came to Yasnaya Polyana. She said, "How can we love humanity and hate those who are close to you?" This could not last. In the autumn of 1910 Tolstoy, accompanied only by his Dr. Makovitsky, leaves Yasnaya Polyana forever. He had no definite plan of action. It was essentially a flight that took place on the night of October 28, 1910. However, on the road Tolstoy felt ill. At first he caught a cold, and then the disease turned into pneumonia, so it was necessary to interrupt the trip and bring sick Lev Nikolaevich from the train at the first big station near the settlement. This station was Ostapovo, now Leo Tolstoy, Lipetsk region. The rumor of the writer's illness immediately spread throughout the neighborhood and far beyond. 6 doctors tried in vain to save the great elder, the disease progressed inexorably. On November 7, 1910, Lev Tolstoy died at the age of 83.